This is class 1 out of 3 classes on the topic of succession planning. So this class will set the framework for the other classes, and it's advisable that you check out the 3 classes and take them together. Because it's quite a lengthy topic, it's best just to stop it from time to time, take some notes and make your own layout and plan for revision and study. It is a straightforward topic and it's common sense in a lot of parts, so it's just a question of noting these and noting the importance of the whole topic itself. So let's move on. Family businesses must take into consideration internal and external pressures and make strategic plans in the event of unforeseen circumstances. Sometimes family businesses are confronted with situations that it was difficult for them to anticipate. For example, the death of a member of the family, perhaps a sudden death. Well, if that person happened to be the person who was also running the family business, now it's a much bigger problem than just simply the bereavement within the family. It's a question of maintaining the business. Who's going to look after the business? Who's going to maintain the business? So having proper plans in place for succession planning, in other words, having somebody picked to take over either at retirement or tragically in the event of death or something of this nature, but having someone ready, trained and capable of taking over is important. But that within a family context can be very controversial. It can raise issues of jealousy within the family and problems and disputes, arguments within the family as to who is selected. And also there are issues about the competencies of the person selected. The person selected may be selected because he or she is related closely to the current CEO of the business. There could be a son or a daughter, for example. But it doesn't mean that they're the best person for the business. They may not have business skills or aptitudes appropriate to the business. So there are many issues to consider when we think of who's going to take over. Succession planning, in other words. So it's an important process for family businesses and a very emotional and delicate time for the business. Trying to select who will take over is very difficult. It's controversial within the family, within the family framework. Controversial because somebody is selected and then the other members of the family, perhaps at the same level, perhaps the grandchildren or the siblings of the CEO, the current CEO, they're going to feel aggrieved on whoever's selected. They're going to feel left out. So it's a very delicate thing to do. If the selection process is going to pick the right person with the right skills and competencies, and also maintain the family and maintain the loyalty of the family towards the business, that's a very complicated process which has to be handled very carefully with very sensitive negotiations. The sooner the business plan for succession, the easier the transfer and transition. So it's important to have the succession plan worked out. I say the sooner, but it's not necessarily the case. Once the person has been selected, perhaps it may be better, in fact, to spend some time in the business learning the procedures of the business, learning by doing, learning by making observations and being involved in the consultations and looking at the issues and problem solving within the business, so that experience is accumulated before he or she finally takes over the business. Now, the need for succession strategy. Well, according to Hodgetts and Kuratko, Succession strategy requires the following consideration: understanding the contextual aspects, identifying successor qualities, and carrying out the succession plan. I'm going to talk about each of these in turn. So let's start with, logically enough, let's start with number one, understanding the contextual aspects. First of all, time. Time is important. Time as to how much time is available to select the appropriate person. How much training must that person have? And what's the time scale? When will that person take over the business? So time is a dimension that must be discussed, and that can be quite controversial, because other members of the family may think it'll happen later rather than sooner. There may be issues about when, and not to mention the how and so on, and the who, but just looking at the time. When will it happen? When will this come into play? And will that person be trained sufficiently in that time period? And also the type of venture. What is the business? If it's a small shop, family business, which is a shop, it may not be a big issue, simply taking over running the shop. It's a small shop on the high street or in some part of the setting, of the town setting or of the city setting. It may not be a big issue. But if the business has grown over a period of time, let's say it was set up 100 years back, and has grown over that period of time, then it may be a small business, but nonetheless quite significant. So what are the skills and competencies required to run that business? What sort of experience should a person have, and how should that person gain the experience? So what is the type of venture, and what's the most appropriate method of managing that venture? And what are the capabilities of the managers? Surely it can't be right just to select members of a family because it's the family name, or because their great-grandfather or whoever set up the business many years ago. The current members of the family may not have business acumen. They may not be qualified to run the business. And therefore, the appointment of one of them could be injurious to the business. It could destroy the business, because that person will make faulty decisions, bad decisions. So what are the capabilities of the managers? That's important to work out. And what's the entrepreneur's vision? I'm going to say entrepreneur here. It's almost a collective term. It's more than one entrepreneur. The family, in a sense, each of them would be capable of, or possible, I should say, to be selected as the CEO or the manager of the business. So all of them, in a sense, are entrepreneurs. But what's the vision? What is the entrepreneurial vision? What is the vision of the one selected? Now, that is an individual concept. But what is that vision? And how does that vision fit with the rest of the members of the family? Do they agree with that? Do they agree with the direction that that person is going to take the business? And look at the environmental factors. Look at the context in which the business operates. Look at the nature of the product. And think about innovation and the competitive world in which we find ourselves today, with globalization and competition from many quarters and rapid technological change. And look at all of what's going on within the environment, the changing legal requirements of business, the social and the ethical positions that businesses are expected to adopt. Look at all of this, all happening at the same time. So the person who takes over should be competent must be aware of all of these and must be competent to implement these changes and to enable the business not just to survive, but to thrive in that environment. So time. Well, time is an important factor. The business owners and managers must start a succession plan as early as possible. That's wise. But it is problematic, as I just said, because it may cause rifts within the family. It may cause issues within the family as to who is selected. But nonetheless, it's a good thing to start early, because that person can then be involved with the business, can build up an experience, learn by doing, as I said, and that will make the transition smooth. There will be greater continuity when the current CEO leaves or retires, then the new one will seamlessly take over. So starting it in good time is wise. The sooner they begin the search for the next leadership team, the better chances of finding the right person. So they're trying to look, at least initially within the family, for the next leader. But if, of course, they fail to agree someone within the family, they may have to look outside the family and bring in an outsider, somebody from outside the family to run the business, because the person is the right person for the job. But then again, it depends on how the family members view the business, to see if it's important or if they consider it to be just almost a hobby that the older members of the family wanted to keep on because of history and tradition. But the sooner they begin the process, generally speaking, the better it is. Sudden succession can take place if unforeseen circumstances arise. For example, death, sudden illness, psychological breakdown. The owner is dealing with legal problems or financial difficulties. Now, in these situations, it's unforeseen, but if suddenly there is a gap at the top of the business, the current CEO or the current senior manager no longer is capable, or has even died, as I just said. If that's the case, there is a vacuum in the business, and the business needs direction. It needs control. So having someone ready is wise. Now, the type of venture. Well, the types of business venture determines the likelihood of appointing a successor. For example, a business owner who is highly skilled within their industry will find it very difficult to appoint the right person as a successor. If a business owner is highly skilled within their industry, then they may have a uniqueness. They may have skills and competencies and abilities that it's very difficult to find those. Certainly difficult to find them within the family, because it's a very restricted set of people. There are fewer of them. And looking for those same skills and abilities may be a problem. And this is particularly true if it's a craft type business. Perhaps craft work where there's a lot of handmade components or handmade finishing of jobs, and where it's really artisans working to complete some task. Now that means it's very difficult to find the right people to succeed. And in that case, the business, if it's to continue, may have to look outside of the family unit. A successor can be appointed fairly quickly if the job requires minimal operations, knowledge and skill. So clearly, the easier the job, the easier it is to find a successor. And it could be found within the family quite easily. Albeit, as I said, it may give rise to jealousy within the family and conflict within the family, that one person selected and not another person. But it would be easy to select, having said that. because the job does not require a lot of skill or a lot of technical know-how. So the more specialized the work, the more difficult it is to find a successor. That's the point. Now, capabilities of the managers. Well, the skills, capabilities, ambition and desires of the successor is an important factor. Whoever's selected as successor in the business, they should set out their agenda. They should specify what they think is important and the direction in which they want to take the business. That's to avoid conflict within the family further in time, further on. So they should be ambitious, they should be keen to be involved, they should have the capabilities. Perhaps they've got business qualifications or technical qualifications that make them suitable. They should have the skills, and they should have a desire, an entrepreneurial desire to succeed. So it's selecting the right person. That's the problem. And as I said earlier, drawing the right person from the family unit is a very restricted exercise. There might be only a very limited number of people from which to draw. And the person selected may not meet the skills requirements or the capabilities or the ambition or the entrepreneurial flair. So there are problems there. The successor must be able to adapt to changing markets and industrial conditions. It's important that the person taking over knows that they're working in an environment of change. The society is changing. We have greater technological change. We have more innovation. We have globalization. We have more contact because better communications channels. We have the empowerment of the consumer because they're able to look up the quality of the products and who distributes it and look at the prices charged by different suppliers. So there's much more going on, and the successor must be able to adapt to all of this and cope with it, and indeed must be able to win. It's important to appoint a successor who has the right attitude and is able to grow the business through their passion. So it's important, once we've said all of the other parts earlier in the slide, it's still important that the person selected has a passion for the job, who wants it, and who's willing to make the commitment to further the business. So appointing the successor is important. It may not come from within a family. It may come from outside of the business. Outside of the family business, I should say. It may be someone who is selected because of his or her noted abilities, their CVs, what they've done in the past, their experiences. And that will enable the business to thrive. And of course, if it is a family business, then the family will receive more by way of dividends every year and will be more better off as a consequence. Now, the entrepreneur's vision, well, it's important that the new successor is to share the same vision and goals as the owner. So it's important for the successor to have the same ideas. There shouldn't be a conflict between the successor in the business and the owner of the business. It should be a smooth transition and almost imperceptible from the outside. That the owner has handed over to the successor and it's just run smoothly. And that's the way it should be. The successor must be able to grow the business to achieve growth and the goals of the business. So once appointed, of course, the successor should have more or less a free hand in trying to deal with the business, because sometimes business decisions have to be acted upon quickly. The successor can't call a meeting every time a decision's got to be made. So the successor must be trusted to make the right decisions and to grow the business and to enable the business to survive in the increasingly competitive world in which we find ourselves. Now, the environmental factors. Well, successors may be required to deal with changing environmental conditions or internal pressures. I just mentioned some of the external ones: innovation, change, communications channels, migration patterns, globalization, greater empowerment of the consumer through knowledge gained through the internet and other publications. It goes on. We're dealing with an increasingly complex structure, and business managers must be competent and comfortable in operating in that environment. Laws are passed by governments indicating how businesses should act. There are rules on the HRM department as to what sort of people they can employ. The products must be fit for purpose. The products must be safe to use. So there are many factors that come into play, and the successor must be capable of dealing with these. Successor may have up-to-date skills and knowledge which might benefit the growth of the business. Sometimes after the succession has been handed over, once the existing senior manager or CEO leaves and the new person takes over, in other words, after the succession has been completed, it may be that the successor has fresh ideas, new ideas. Even if he or she has worked in the business for some time to gain experience, they may have privately desired to do certain things which would improve the business. Of course, if they're controversial, it may lead to more problems with the other managers or with the successor with the CEO or the senior manager who just left. So there may be disputes about how they see the running of the business. But it is the case that the successor may have new ideas, a fresh pair of eyes. Some organizations appoint financial experts to take over control and review existing survival strategies. So there is a tendency or a history of companies, when they're looking for successors, they will opt for a safe pair of hands, and that could be in the form of an accountant or an administrator, someone who has got a track record, a history of proven work, of not being too adventurous, not being too entrepreneurial, but being safe to protect the business. And that may be the way in which the succession is moved. These are environmental factors. These are outside of the business. Of course, there are internal factors that we've been discussing. We discussed it mainly in the context of family businesses, but a lot of what we said is not necessarily restricted to family. It could be just small businesses looking for a successor. But that's all we're going to deal with this one. This is the first of 3 videos on this topic, so let's leave it at that. The source that we used throughout is that one mentioned earlier. And let's conclude the video and say thank you for watching.